My last video about Keir Starmer actually managed to lose me a few subscribers. And why is that? Well, it's because I dared to utter the truth, or at least the truth as I perceive it, which is that Keir Starmer's meeting with Donald Trump wasn't a disaster. It wasn't the unmitigated catastrophe that so many people were hoping for. In fact, Donald Trump implied that we would have a UK-US trade deal and that we would face no tariffs.
He earned whatever they pay him. He earned today. He was working hard at lunch. And I'm very receptive to it. I think we, in all fairness, in all seriousness, I think we have a very good chance at arriving at a very good deal. JD and Scott and Howard, all the people are working on it, and I think we have a good chance at arriving at a deal that could be terrific. Really terrific for both countries, okay?
I will lay praise where it's deserved, and I will lay blame where that is deserved. And it's the second part of the equation that we come to today, because all of the success that Starmer had in America with Donald Trump, well, he's managed to unravel it in just 5 days. Now, that's what we're going to talk about today. Keir Starmer's guide to clutching defeat from the jaws of victory. Regardless of whether you think it was justified or not, Donald Trump was clearly very frustrated with Zelensky's words and actions during their meeting in the White House. Everyone has seen clips of that by now, and if you haven't, there's a video on my channel, you can go and check it out. Trust me, you are missing out. It's like an explosive row in the White House. But anyway, what was Zelensky's first step after this meeting, or this brawl, concluded? Well, he flew to London to meet with Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves and collect £2.5 billion British pounds to continue the war effort.
Worth £2.26 billion as part of our unwavering and ongoing support for the Ukrainian people.
So literally one day after Trump and Zelensky fall out and Donald Trump declares that Zelensky is not interested in peace at all and just wants more money to continue the war, well, Keir Starmer gives him more money to continue the war, £2.5 billion. And this is on top of the £3 billion a year that Starmer has already signed over to Ukraine. Just to put this into perspective, the winter fuel payments for pensioners that Starmer cancelled only cost £1.4 billion per year. Yeah, kind of mind-blowing, right? Now, all of this is obviously going to irritate and irk Donald Trump. And it actually gets worse, because Keir Starmer then said he was willing to back a peace deal with boots on the ground and planes in the sky.
First, we will keep the military aid flowing and keep increasing the economic pressure on Russia to strengthen Ukraine now. Second, we agreed that any lasting peace must ensure Ukraine's sovereignty and security, and Ukraine must be at the table. Third, in the event of a peace deal, we will keep boosting Ukraine's own defensive capabilities to deter any future invasion. Fourth, we will go further to develop a coalition of the willing to defend a deal in Ukraine and to guarantee the peace. Not every nation will feel able to contribute, but that can't mean that we sit back. Instead, those willing will intensify planning now with real urgency. The UK is prepared to back this with boots on the ground and planes in the air.
So Starmer makes 2 points here. First of all, the money will keep flowing into Ukraine, regardless of the fact that the UK is effectively broke and we're up to our eyeballs in debt. We're just going to put it on a credit card and let future generations pay for it. If you don't believe me, by the way, just look around at the decline of Britain and tell me that we're looking after ourselves properly. We're not. Now, the next thing that he says is we're going to put UK boots on the ground after a peace deal has been reached. Now, yes, it's after peace has been reached, and these are peacekeeping troops. Fine, it's not, we're going to directly engage in the war, which is what some people seem to be claiming, but not what he said. But it's still utter insanity, and let me explain to you why. Zelensky claims that Putin will never agree or never hold by any of the agreements he makes. You either believe Zelensky or you don't. But if you believe Zelensky that he won't hold to any peace treaties or deals, do you really want British troops standing in the way if Russia re-attacks Ukraine? Now, I already know what you're thinking. You're thinking that having British troops in Ukraine is by itself a massive deterrent against a second Russian attack. Why? Well, because if Russia were to attack Ukraine and British troops were inside, that could potentially trigger Article 5 of NATO, and then you've got an all-out war between Russia and NATO. And Putin surely doesn't want that, so he simply will not attack Ukraine for a second time. Except this logic doesn't work, because it would never trigger Article 5. And that's because for Article 5 to actually be triggered, in NATO terms, a NATO member must be attacked on NATO soil. But Ukraine is not NATO soil, so Article 5 simply would not be triggered at all. And now what you're left with is a pretty damning realisation, right? That despite this battlefield being closer to China than the UK, we have decided to put ourselves right at the front lines of it. And if Putin calls Keir Starmer's bluff and does attack, perhaps even including British troops, it does not trigger an all-out war. We don't have our NATO friends to back us up. They can choose to, or they can choose not to. A pretty dangerous position. In fact, all you end up with is a UK plus Ukraine war against Russia. And someone's going to have to work really, really hard to convince me that this precarious position is somehow in our national security interests, because I don't see it. But the good news doesn't stop there, because Keir Starmer also announced that we're going to start building missiles, yay, to give to Ukraine.
I announced a deal that perfectly symbolises the new era. A partnership with Ukraine that allows them to use £1.6 billion of UK export finance to buy 5,000 air defence missiles manufactured in Belfast. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, that means UK jobs, UK skills, UK finance pulling together for our national interest.
Now, the language around these gifts is always the same. It's loans, it's purchase agreements. One day we'll get this money back from Ukraine. But it's never going to happen, right? Be realistic. After this war has concluded, the Ukrainian economy will be in absolute ruins. Not only that, the infrastructure spending, rebuilding the country, and the defence spending of Ukraine will absolutely take priority, not loans that European nations and America have made to Ukraine. That's not going to be the priority for them, and that's perfectly understandable. As long as you understand that these are not loans, they're gifts, then that's fine, okay? I just want to make that point. But why then do politicians insist on calling them loans? And the reason is, I'm not being cynical here, it's fairly straightforward. It's because that way, if they're asked a difficult question about, should we really be sending 12, 13, 14 billion pounds to Ukraine when pensioners can't afford to heat their homes, they'll say, oh, well, it's a loan. It's not a gift. We're not sending it, it's a loan. Okay, so it just helps politicians dodge the difficult questions. Now, look, I come back to the point I made just a couple of minutes ago about how any of this is in our national security interests. And when I heard this news about the missiles, I posed 5 questions on X. And I'm going to post them again here. Well, I'm going to read them to you, actually. And I just want you to think about it. When a politician says all of this is in our own national security interests, ask them these 5 questions. 1. Eastern Ukraine is closer to China than the UK. How is it a UK national security interest? Okay. How does provoking a nuclear power aid our national security interests? Okay. How does building missiles but then sending them to Ukraine rather than keeping them promote our national security interests? We have no decent air defence like over the UK. We have some jets that can react, but nothing that could stop a hypersonic ballistic missile, right? Okay. If Putin does attack the UK for some reason because of our involvement in Ukraine, how did that promote our national security interests? Okay, and if Putin is never going to attack the UK, then how is any of this in our national security interests? And I think if you ask a politician those questions, you would not get a clear and concise answer out of them. But to be fair, I suppose if you asked them what colour the sky was, you also wouldn't get a clear and concise answer out of them, so maybe that doesn't really hold much weight. Now, the uniparty reaction has already kicked into full swing, just as you might expect. Priti Patel, the former Tory Home Secretary, well, she's been cheering Keir Starmer along, saying that she's proud to see global Britain doing global Britain stuff.
This is a very critical moment for our country, and global Britain, as ever, has stepped up, as we've seen over the weekend. What is a very serious and significant time for a close ally of ours, which is Ukraine, and how, of course, we work with our European allies to do what we've been advocating for a consistent period of time, which is increase our defence spending, ensure that our national security is absolutely safe, make sure that we defend and support Ukraine, and particularly at this critical time for Ukraine, that they are out there with the resources that they need to protect their integrity, to defend their sovereignty, to defend freedom and the very values that, you know what, Chopper? Many successive generations before us fought for our own country. We are a country that stood up to tyranny in the Second World War.
Now, there's a lot to unpack from Priti Patel here, because I don't understand how this is a very critical moment for our nation. I also don't understand this idea, this concept that Ukraine is a very close ally of ours. Since when? Have they ever come to our aid? Have we fought a war together? No, this is a relatively new idea, and 4 years ago, nobody would have held it. You know who is a very close ally of ours? America. And yet we're defying them on the Ukraine issue. So go figure, this is nothing to do with allies or anything like that.
That's why we share one voice, one mission and a determination to really support Ukraine, because it does matter to our own security in our own country. And by the way, to the security of Europe, which sounds familiar, doesn't it, when you think about our history, but also it has an impact on America's security as well.
Look, no matter how many politicians say that this is somehow in our national security interests, it doesn't make it true. If anything, the more politicians that say it across the entire political spectrum, the more convinced I am that this is probably not the case. Anyway, that's just my natural cynicism coming through. But it wasn't just Priti Patel jumping on the uni-party bandwagon, because Nigel Farage had to chip in and spur on Keir Starmer. He said that he hopes Keir Starmer can use his new role to bring Ukraine and the US together soon. Okay. And what new role is that exactly? I'm confused, but I'm not the only one who's confused. And if you want a good laugh, go and read the replies to Nigel Farage's tweet, because people are like, what are you talking about? So what do you think Donald Trump has made of all of this? Yeah, he's not too pleased. Remember that clip I showed you at the start of this video of Trump saying perhaps we could have a UK-US trade deal and there'll be no tariffs placed on the UK? Well, he's changed his mind, because actually Trump is now thinking about putting tariffs on the UK. Fantastic. I rightly praised Keir Starmer for managing to get that concession out of Donald Trump, but he's blown it up within 5 days. And yet again, people will convince you that all of this is in our national security interests. So sending money away, sending missiles away and not keeping them, damaging our relationship with the United States, the special relationship, getting tariffs placed on us, antagonizing a nuclear power, all of that somehow, you are told by every politician, is in our national security interests. But I'm just not convinced by that argument. Someone's going to have to explain to me why the benefits from all of this outweigh the negatives, because I just don't see it. And you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of COVID-19. You know, obviously a very different kind of situation, but there was complete political consensus there. Only one MP stood against it, and that was Andrew Bridgen. Every other political party, every leader, everyone told you all the exact same things. Toe the party line. Why am I saying all of this? I'm saying it because I want to challenge this narrative that Ukraine, good. Everything you can do to help Ukraine, good. Not only good, always in your own interests. The more money you can send to Ukraine, the better it will be for you. The more weapons you can send to Ukraine, the better it will be for you. The more Ukrainians that die in a trench, the better it is for you. Somehow. Jets, troops, everything, all good. Annoying Donald Trump, ruining the special relationship with America. As long as it helps Ukraine, good. Always in your interests. Is that really true? I don't see anyone in Europe, a lot of people in America, but I don't see anyone in Europe challenging this narrative, not appropriately, right? Someone, like I said numerous times in this video, needs to explain to me how this is all in our interests. Versus, and this is the opposite approach, European nations spend their money building their own defense. There are 500 million Europeans and 140 million Russians. If we spend enough money on our defense, we are completely impenetrable, completely indestructible. In fact, if we spent enough money on our defense, even America probably couldn't take Europe, right? Last thing I'll say before I go is this. Do I hate Ukrainians? No, of course not. Quite the opposite. Does Ukraine have a right to defend itself? Yes, absolutely. If the situation were different and there were a foreseeable strategy for Ukraine to win back all of its previous territories and return Russia to the borders they had pre-2014, would we be having a different conversation? Yes. Probably, but there is no such situation without US and European support, and America is pulling all of that support. Just today, America has declared we're not sending any more weapons or aid to Ukraine. We're just not doing it. We're not funding this war anymore. Now, without that, Ukraine could potentially collapse, and I'm talking about properly collapsing. If they run out of artillery, rounds, shells, if they run out of ammunition, they're in a really bad spot. And suddenly what you look at is not Ukraine losing 20% of their territory, but actually the Russians could seize this opportunity as they run out of ammunition and just storm roll through to Kiev. And yet somehow, again, not suing for peace will have mysteriously been in Ukraine's interest. I just don't see it. I think this situation is really, really complicated. I want to see fewer people dying in trenches, because this is trench warfare. It's like World War I and World War II. It's absolutely awful. If we keep funding it, as we have for the last 2 years, the battle lines stay exactly where they are. Nothing changes. If we stop funding it, if America stops funding it, then this situation could get really bad for Ukrainians very, very quickly. And what you could have is total Russian victory. People really need to wake up and start considering other options than just grandstanding and sending a few billion here and there. If Europe really wanted to support Ukraine, what they should have done is send as much as they possibly could right at the start of the war. But that ship has sailed now. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians are dead. They're kidnapping people from the streets and sending them to the front lines. I've seen a guy with Down syndrome, I shouldn't have, with Down syndrome in a Ukrainian uniform in a Ukrainian trench. It's absolutely insane. They don't have the capacity. They have the will to fight because they're fighting for their own territory, but they no longer really have the capacity to fight, especially not without American support. So the idea of sending British troops there and all of this stuff, I just think it's crazy. I think it's chaos. I know, again, I'm going to lose a ton of subscribers for saying this, but I don't, fine. At least if I lost subscribers, then you heard the message, right? Let me know what you think about all of this. Look, Ukraine, prior to 2014, our media was saying was the most corrupt nation in the world. A lot of money laundering, a lot of human trafficking, all terrible stuff. And then suddenly now they're our closest ally, etc., etc. Just go away, think about it, make your own mind up. If you disagree with me, I absolutely welcome that comment. You can say that to me. I think that's it, because I'm going into rambling mode and I don't want to. So I'll see you on the next one. I look forward to this video getting 300 views, but at least I'll be able to reply to every one of your comments. Till the next one.